And welcome back to Nasrec. We are at the 55th conference of the African National Congress. And as you saw there, just before Lebu took that back from the break, we were actually watching the Finance Minister, I Dr Levy Ndou, and he is at the Progressive Business Forum and speaking to business leaders and others invited there this morning. And I'm still with Professor Levy Ndou, just talking about what's been happening and analyzing some of the statements that have been made here at the 55th National Conference. Now, Professor Ndou, just getting to Minister I Dr Levy Ndou there and what he has been saying. So let me first get your overall sentiment in terms of what the minister had to say.
Well, I think it's good for the minister to constantly interact with business for the purposes of ensuring that our economy in South Africa is actually growing or it's in a very good shape. But overall, he appears to be able to identify more challenges that we face as a nation. He appears to be worried about a number of aspects. I've identified two of those. One of the areas that the minister appears to be very worried about is the constant load shedding. Even though, before he could even conclude, someone has already asked the question to say, if you're saying we've got 14 years into load shedding and already we have spent billions and billions of rands, it appears as if you don't have a solution to the challenge of load shedding. I've also heard some part in his speech talking about the public having to pay more in order to be able to save Eskom. Obviously, that is one area that most South Africans would love to hear. And he also spoke about the infrastructure investment, particularly in the Eastern Cape. That has a lot of financial resources pumped into, but the challenge that he identifies is that there is lack of skills for people to be able to participate in those infrastructural development or projects so that they actually make a difference. Now, that should take us to the report by the president yesterday. The president yesterday was quite excited in his report that there is a lot of money that has been pumped into higher education and a lot of students are getting funding for them to get qualifications and skilled. Now, if the finance minister says we have no skills, and the president is saying we've invested a lot of money in order to skill the South African population, there could be a problem that maybe we're not skilling or not educating South Africans properly, because you are excited about educating them, pumping money into education, but the business is saying you're giving us people that are not properly skilled. So it takes us to where I am now, that higher education should therefore look at the environment that we are in and train students that should respond to the challenges that are there in society, so that Minister Godongwana should not complain about skills. Money is there to train people, but unfortunately it appears as if there's a mismatch.
Well, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, it would seem, because if you listen to the minister and you listen to the challenges that you say the minister identifies, and you look at what the president had to say yesterday, surely we as the public, we are the ones looking at this and saying, that is a problem, that is a challenge, we need to find solutions here, and we expect leaders to come with the solutions. So if the leaders are asking or outlining the obvious, where are the solutions supposed to come from?
They both agree, the president and the finance minister, that one of the major challenges facing South Africa is that of corruption. It is what the president said yesterday. It's exactly what the minister said this morning. And therefore, it will require more effort to be put into ensuring that corruption is actually being dealt with, I know earlier on we had a discussion about the government's response on the state capture report and the move in which law enforcement agencies are actually moving. So my view is that we need government to provide a lot of political will to fight corruption, not only verbally, but also make sure that these institutions are adequately resourced so that they're able to fight against corruption. Another important aspect is that most South Africans appears to be saying we are prepared to assist government in the fight against corruption. And I would expect to hear more being said about the protection of whistleblowers by South African government.
Well, it's been a while. People have been killed. People have been forced to leave this country. And still, you know, there are whistleblowers who can attest to this day that it's been difficult for them to either find employment ever again, or their lives are still in danger. So it's more lip service than it is actual action. But also, Minister Godongwana mentioning in that speech that we are actually barking at the wrong tree. He says the problem is not neoliberalism or austerity. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the problem is bigger than that. Government has been given the mandate by all of us. By extension, the ANC is given the mandate to look at the policies that are actually going to respond to the needs of the South African population. We might have a debate about neoliberal policies and other policies, but the issue at hand is that we have got challenges right in front of us that the business people that the minister is talking to are saying, we're getting scared that you could not deal with load shedding for 14 years. It's no longer about time to talk about policies, patching them and amending them here and there. It is time now for action. The time for policy has been there for quite some time. What ordinary citizens are looking at now is to say, these are quick measures that we have in place. Of course, patient as we are for the past 14 years, we can still be patient and say, give us a short-term plan, a medium and a long-term plan. The next 3 years, give us the solution. And there has been a talk about 18 months to address the current crisis of load shedding. We're quite patient. We've been patient, but there should be a clear direction that government is saying, we're going to end this, no longer complain to business people, but say, come and invest, everything is in order.
But we know those answers are not forthcoming. Minister Godongwana saying there that since 2019, 230 billion rand has been spent on Eskom since 2019. Now, he also says the problem is not about fixing Eskom, but rather fixing power to the grid. Now, let's unpack that. You know, what exactly does he mean?
Well, I think he's talking about having sufficient reserves that should be able to be provided to the people, and not necessarily having to look at just pumping money into Eskom. He's talking about the expertise within the system that must say, do we have to deplete everything that is available in the system? Most people at Eskom are talking about the green. They say we're not being able to provide sufficient energy resources, and we end up going to go to our reserves. And that talks to planning, in my view. That talks to redirecting the resources properly to where they're supposed to be going. But unfortunately, it appears as if Eskom is not attracting the right expertise that are supposed to be going there. And other issues relates to leadership. Constant change of leadership at Eskom, in my view, could be the problem. And how many times have we had CEOs being changing at Eskom in the past 8 years? And you could even lose the count of how many people who have actually lost running that entity. So it will require a lot of government support, but also identifying right people who must then be able to make a lot of change at that entity.
So then the question of NERSA, and the minister basically talking about, underwriting this Eskom debt as government, but also the fact that NERSA's determination will have a profound impact on the trajectory of Eskom going forward. But we know that Eskom's application to NERSA for next year is 32%. And I think it's about 9% or so in the following year. So surely that's not sustainable, because what is happening is that the incompetence of Eskom, however that may play out, whether it's through malfeasance, corruption, whatever is happening there, is being passed on to the consumer, who has nothing to do with why Eskom is failing in the main, because we know that when we talk about people not paying for services, yes, it's part of the problem, but that's another issue, because Eskom and the municipalities or whoever it is, they need to make sure that they collect the revenue that's due to them. But why must the consumer be saddled with a bill where there is wholesale corruption taking place at the power utility?
We need to appreciate the fact that there is an element of consultation when Eskom has to increase the prices. And fair enough, it is actually done very openly, and the entire population is invited to make their views heard. What I have not observed, it's whether the views of the citizens are actually taken care of and respond based on what the people are actually saying. And in most instances, Eskom would always get what they actually ask for, which is what the ordinary citizens will be against. And in response as well, even though the price will go up, which means that there is more financial resources getting into Eskom, we still continue with the load shedding or power cuts. And the question would be, what then are you doing with the money that you're constantly requesting for on a regular basis? But there is another very painful area that we need to look at. There has been a complaint that there are a number of state departments and municipalities that are not paying money to Eskom. That should be quite worrying, because you expect a municipality to lead by example.
But the minister doesn't touch on that.
Of course.
The president will not touch on that. And again, why is that acceptable?
It should be quite a worrying factor, because there are instances where citizens are paying money to municipalities, and these municipalities are supposed to service these citizens. The expectation is that municipalities themselves should lead by example and ensure that they actually pay money to Eskom, so that in return we all become beneficiaries. You have heard of a number of municipalities that had to take a difficult decision to go and switch off many businesses, not because they want to service the citizens, because they want to pay their municipality staff. And now you therefore have to look at what then becomes the priority of these municipalities. Is it servicing the people, or ensuring that the staff at the municipality are happy? And that's where you have to look at the priorities. And unfortunately, the priority is on the staff that is employed by these municipalities.
I come back to the cognitive dissonance in all of this, because this is the African National Congress that is the ruling party in South Africa. My expectation would be for the African National Congress to have really gone down and looked at all the problems that we are faced with as a society and come here with solutions. What we are hearing is a regurgitation of all the problems that we know. We sit, we talk about this, we live through these challenges and problems on a daily basis. So what is the point of all of this regurgitation?
What, in my view, is the expectation of ordinary citizens is not to hear leaders complaining. I think it's enough to have ordinary citizens complaining, and the role of leaders being to listen to the complaints and provide solutions. And we appear to be having leaders who have been groomed in complaints and worrying and struggling. And instead of making a difference whilst given the opportunity to do so, they forget that they need to change the gear and become solution makers. And unfortunately, that does not appear to be the case. We constantly hear our own leaders complaining about what is happening, rather than them saying, I've heard about your problems. Give me 3 years to fix this problem. Give me 6 months to fix this problem. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And that is why the challenges that we have been facing over years remains, because there appears not to be having a program to say, let's deal with challenge 1 and forget about it. Let's deal with challenge 2 and forget about it. And it appears as if the approach, it's not properly coordinated. And that's why you'll still have people complaining about public health. You'll still hear people complaining about transportation. You'll still hear people complaining about housing and poor maintenance of the roads infrastructure. I know with this one that Mbalula said he's going to embark on a program to close every pothole in South Africa. So we're waiting to have a moment in which in South Africa we don't have potholes.
And I was at the launch of that program, and I remember my first question to Minister Mbalula was, in fact, more of a statement than a question, or maybe a bit of both. And I said to him, when I was told I need to go there to the Vaal on that Monday because the minister is launching a program of closing potholes, my first question in my mind was, why is the national minister launching a program to close potholes? Surely the national minister has greater issues to concern himself with. But in the end, I understood why the national minister has to embark on closing potholes, because the municipalities don't have, one, the budgets, because they're practically bankrupt, and two, the same municipalities, in one of the points that Minister Kotongwana raised here, he talks about a weak state of infrastructure and the challenge that they have in terms of the capacity to spend, even where the budgets do exist. Now, again, the deployees who serve in these municipalities, why aren't you sending people who have the capacity to actually deal with these problems? I mean, again, it's the same question. Why are you moaning?
The problem goes deeper, and I'll tell you why it goes deeper. I think we've lowered the bar in South Africa, especially when it comes to public representatives at local government. The requirements for one to become a councillor are quite very low. You just need to be a citizen. You should be beyond 18 years. You should have an ID and registered to vote. That's all. So that is the kind of leadership that we have at local level. So if you have that kind of political leadership, then you also need to look at how do they actually plan. Are these people well capacitated to run the budgets? Are these people able to develop programs that can be integrated to address the issues
But
that are
we
there?
know that they are not, because we know you can go to any municipality and there's practically no road left.
Yes.
People don't have water, and yet money is returned to the fiscus because of that particular challenge that the minister outlines again for us, that there is a capacity deficit to actually spend.
Should we therefore go back to how certain individuals are being employed in these municipalities? Because there has been a constant complaint about deploying people without proper skills and qualifications in certain positions in the municipalities. The Zondo Commission spoke very harshly about the cadre deployment. Some of this can be blamed onto cadre deployment and mismatching of individuals in certain positions of responsibility. There are people who are occupied in positions that they are not supposed to be employed onto, and there appears to be a relaxation in terms of ensuring that right people are therefore being employed in those areas. One other area that would signal an element of not being prepared to solve problems, it's when you go to an area and you get the municipality or the district council having invested money on a signboard that says potholes. And that for me is an indication that says we're not prepared to fix these potholes. At least
we'll just warn you.
We're warning you that
there's a lot of potholes.
If you come here, there are potholes.
That is actually very true. So a very interesting one, that one, and perhaps we should just park it on that note. So we'd rather print a board that says, potholes ahead, but we're not going to close the potholes. Who knows?